welcome to the Game Dev Local podcast. I am your host, Laura Donohue. You can refer to me as she, her. And today I'm going to be talking with Claire Vergnes, she, her as well, about inclusive design. Claire is a researcher with me at Sutherland Labs with a background in design and ergonomics. Seeing the world through a multicultural perspective helped her build an empathic lens, which, as a human-centered advocate, serves her in her research. Before Sutherland, Claire worked as a graphic designer in various places, as well as experienced the hectic startup environment whilst doing web design. Outside of work, you'll probably find Claire in the park practicing yoga, putting a playlist together, or asking people what their Madeleine de Proust are. Claire also happens to be my amazingly wonderful mentee. Claire, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Laura, for inviting me. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this.
Yes, we're going to have a great time. But first, and I'm sure you mentioned this when I first started mentoring you, oh my God, 2 years ago? Almost?
Yeah, I think that was 2 years ago.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
So time flies.
It really does. Oh my gosh. So I'm definitely due a refresher. And for, our listeners, can you remind me what a Madeleine de Proust is?
Yeah, so it's like a French expression that basically refers to any smells or tastes or anything to do with senses that reminds you of a specific memory. So it can be of your childhood or of just a specific memory. Like I would say the best example of this is in the movie Ratatouille at the end.
Spoilers for Ratatouille. Skip ahead.
Sorry, stop right here if you haven't watched the movie Ratatouille. It's a must watch actually. But I will still say it. At the end, the main villain, I would say, of the movie, is eating a ratatouille made by Ratatouille, Remy the rat, and he is transported back to his childhood home where his mom used to cook him ratatouille, and things like this is really, I really like to hear what people's Madeleine de Proust are. Actually, Laura, what's yours?
I knew you were going to ask that. Yeah. And I think immediately, so there were a couple things that I thought of, which actually all involve water. So growing up in New York City, you're surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean and the rivers. And a big part of my childhood was going to Coney Island and going on the Cyclone, the big wooden roller coaster that you thought might fall apart at any minute, or, going to the beach and body surfing on the waves, getting Nathan's hot dogs. So I just and I even taste, it's so weird. I taste the salt water in my mouth right now. So I think I am having a Madeleine de Proust moment right now.
But see how it makes you feel. I really enjoy those moments. And it just brings back memory, and it's not a bad thing sometimes.
No. And in fact, I feel very happy right now because I had all sorts of happy memories, from when I was a very small child through adolescence, adulthood. I'm in a really good place right now. I recommend everyone do this exercise. This is really, really great. Let's all just take a moment. What about yours? What's your one?
Mine is this perfume bottle that we still have in France. I'm from France, by the way. But my mom used to put this perfume on us, my brother and I, as babies. And sometimes I can smell anytime actually is still being sold. It's I think Bulgari for babies or something. I don't know, like, but every time it just reminds me of those like nice moments in the south of France, and yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's incredible. What a
yeah, it's really
wonderful
nice.
way to remember things. And it actually makes me think about game design as well. And if there's some kind of Madeline de Proust moment that people can experience from either like playing a game or they see something in real life and then it like roots them to that. I guess for me, funnily enough, it would be, I guess, like my closest one to one, which might be a little odd, is Grand Theft Auto Vice City, since that was, I
Yes,
believe, based in Miami and that had like a lot of beach scenes and things like that. So I think that definitely brought back, was feeling a bit nostalgic while
yeah,
committing a number of, of crimes.
of crimes.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I
but
wonder.
but but that's really interesting what you're saying. Actually, it's kind of like what you're mentioning reminds me of like adding like senses, like make the experience of gaming perhaps like multisensory. And I think that might be a bit difficult to achieve, but why not? There's this thing in the 60s actually, or 70s in America, which was smell o cinema or something like this. And basically, users, like people who came to watch a movie, had scratch cards, and they had like basically like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like up to 10 different like cards, and they had to scratch it every time they would see a number on the screen. So I think like that reminds like this. I don't know if no,
That is so cool. I feel
that's
like I do remember like 4D movie theaters where like if you're sitting in your seat and like a horde of mice come like scurrying onto the floor and then you felt like there were vents underneath that like blew
yes.
air. So you like felt you were there. I don't remember like the Aura
Hmm.
Factory component, but and I don't know if I mean there are tons of different video games out there. Maybe someone has made a scent card to go with their video game.
Maybe.
Shout out in the comments if you've seen
Yeah.
that before. And if you haven't, then maybe this is where you can level up your game design and immersive, qualities of your game because that actually sounds really cool.
No, for sure. Maybe technology is a bit is not going fast enough for things like this. Uh, but let's not how do you say it? Let's wait for the future and see what happens. That would be really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, or even
Uh,
just using, I mean, I know a lot of obviously, most games you acquire digitally now, so you don't necessarily get like a CD case or something like that. But sometimes you can, have add ons, or maybe you just even, as part of the game's purchase, you get shipped like a scent card, or even maybe
mm,
a set of instructions to like collect these scents. And it could be connected to solving a mystery in a game. Now I really want to make this game. Thank you, Claire.
yeah, me too. Now that we're talking about it, I'm like literally thinking about, yeah, actually the game could connect to the Internet of Things in your house, and things could start become immersive. That might be really interesting, actually.
Oh my
Let's
god.
make this game.
Okay, I'm sorry, the episode has changed. We're now going to talk about introducing like or factory components into video game development. No, but like this is definitely something that
No,
we're going to revisit this at some
no.
point.
Next episode.
Absolutely. So, right. So kind of the main reason why we're here is you're kind of, I mean, not kind of, you are our ergonomics, empathic design queen at work. And we've had a lot of different discussions about, inclusive design, and human factors and ergonomics, and all of these topics that really need to be spoken about more in professional settings and product development, and of course in game development. And so, Claire, how would you describe, like, what is inclusive design? What does inclusive design mean to you?
Yeah, really good question at the beginning, just to set the definition. So inclusive design is basically like an approach, a design approach or a way of thinking that's really like is inclusive, like it creates like whether it's like products, experiences, environments, like making them accessible and usable by most people, like as many people as possible actually, just regardless of any factors or any like for example age, ability, cultural background, how do you say physical mobility, and the list goes on. So like regardless of all of these factors, and really it's, yeah, I don't know what to add to this. It's just this way of thinking that's just trying to make life inclusive, because life is basically you're evolving through life and you're encountering design. So like that can be even a glass, that can be a pen, and making these as accessible as possible for everybody is basically inclusive design.
Mm.
No.
Yeah, so really simple and straightforward then.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what's kind of the philosophy behind that? Because you were mentioning, it goes into the design of everyday objects and experiences and things like that. Like, how do we know if something is inclusive?
So there's many ways of knowing that something is inclusive, but I will first talk about like the philosophy, the thinking behind it. And please, again, let me know about the other questions after if I missed it. So the thinking behind it is really like, I'm going to take an example here. So I think we talked about this as well before, but in design school, they give you like basically principles for design, principles for good design. And I've been told many, many times that design have to be good, and that is the main aim. And for to take an example, like Dieter Rams, he's a product designer, and he wrote 10 commandments or 10 guidelines for good design. And actually, maybe I have it in front of me just to let you know. Actually, I do. It's just to give you a few idea of what his guidelines are. It's innovative, useful, aesthetic, making something understandable, unobtrusive, honest, long-lasting, up to down to the last detail, environmental friendly, and most important, as little design as possible. So these are just a few things, and I think inclusive design relates most to the honest bit, just because you're ultimately designing for, I don't know, the whole population. You don't know who is your target audience sometime. So I think designing for all just makes the design process easier, less iterative, and basically innovative in a way, because you will be finding ideas that you wouldn't have in the first place if you were designing for the perfect user, age 30, perfect health, men. I would also add men, because most designs are made for men in their 30s, with perfect health, no mental health conditions, all of this. So yeah. Uh, and what was the other question? Sorry.
No, that's great. And, and
Yeah.
it's something that comes up a lot, I think, across multiple disciplines as well. In healthcare, for example, a lot of kind of, the testing that's done, typically, I mean, I think things have like been changing. Of course, things have been getting better over time, though it really needs to catch up. It is typically men that are kind of like the, participants of, health clinical trials and things like that. A lot of, kind of baseline data and things like that is based off of men. And how it's really important that, and when you're actually designing something or working on something to check your own identity because, inevitably you're going to be designing something for yourself because you're working on it. And, again, a lot of things have changed, and it's important to say that, there are a lot of men out there, who have uh, taken some really great strides in, being inclusive and, following through on inclusive design. But, starting out, it was typically, exactly designed for healthy, able bodied males, typically, and
Yeah.
white as well. That is definitely still very much the case. And there's just a wealth of research about how, certain minorities and groups are just totally left out. For just wasn't convenient to include them. um, so and I was wondering actually, because you were saying that there should be as little design as possible and how that's really important. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. So a little, you're basically this principle is to take out down all of the details to have just the end product, make it as simple as possible. I think many of you might know the phrase less is more. This really comes from that. So basically, the science behind it is you're stripping down the design less to up to the really essence of it. And by this, you're stripping down all of the cognitive load that you might need to interact with that design. So what I'm saying is like there's less details, there's your brain will process the information faster.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could see how that becomes increasingly important when there are people, who have certain accessibility needs. And especially when playing a video game, because, depending on the game, you're having all of this, information being thrown at you, visuals, audio, not smells yet. We're working on that. There are the inputs that you're doing as well. So touch is actually a factor as well because you're usually touching a controller or touching a screen, or maybe you're using your voice as a controller, and so that interaction as well is going to increase that cognitive load, which can be perfectly fine and is what can actually make a lot of games fun, right? Because we don't necessarily, depending on who you're designing for and what the goal is, you don't want to just press the button to save, the world. You want to have a little bit of challenge, and that's kind of what makes it fun. But it sounds like, when thinking about inclusive design, you want to be aware of these kind of hurdles that can get in the way of the enjoyment for, individuals with accessibility needs. Have I got, yeah, like, what do you think?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. What you're saying is like really, really resonating with me. Like, sometimes I feel like, I mean, it's not sometimes. It's if you don't have somebody with an impairment or really it's different. Somebody that is different from you, from who your peers are in your team, you will not see firsthand that that it's a challenge. For example, like you're saying, like touch, touch is a really big factor in game experience or any experience in general. Like when it's, even if it doesn't relate to you right now, let's say in 20, 30, 40 years, it might become really relevant because if you're passionate about games, you might want to play like when you're 70 or 80 even. I know that there's a developer who won, who's like the oldest games developer who won like an Apple award recently. Like there's no limit to creativity and fun and all of this, but everything needs to considerate the whole population. So maybe you will lose your sense of touch in 40 years, and you will not have like the same feedback on the screen. Let's say you will not understand why it's not responsive. But yeah, there's plenty of considerations to take in account, and how to say, aging of your body is like a massive one. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm going to be a cyborg, by the time I'm 80. So I'll be able to do anything and everything, and it'll be fine. But no, but that's totally true. And I think that goes for most people who are listening. People typically start playing at a young age. And, even at 33, which for some people might think is very old, and then other people will think, oh god, you're still a baby. Hand-eye coordination has changed. Having the ability to keep track of different kinds of like information coming in has changed, and so there are games that I would love to play and enjoy, but again, like, just not really able to anymore due to the limitations through which I can process like the information in front of me. Now, does that mean that the developers need to, spend every single dollar or pound or whatever their local currency is to make it so that I, Laura Donohue, can play their game again? Not necessarily. But it definitely begs to the question of, you know, how can inclusive design like enhance our game, and at the end of the day, like draw wider audiences as well. And I think that's part of why this is so important. And I mean, it might also just be kind of self-explanatory based on everything we've talked about. But from your perspective, why do you feel that inclusive design is so important?
Yeah, so many things. Like, first of all, yourself, ethically, you want to design something good that's going to touch as many people as possible and give those people a great experience. And that's like providing like equity to your audience, just equal access and just opportunities for them to experience your game. Then after, it's important because, how do you say, you empower users. So you empower them to, for example, achieve their goals, whereas like in games or in different area, it's something that people often disregard, and that is like emotions attached to something, attached to an experience, and it's not maybe disregard, but are not as aware as they should. And this will make people like build an emotional bond with your game or the experience that you're creating and come back to it. enjoy it, talk to it to their friends and family. It's when you use something good, you want to share what you want to share about it. Like, yeah, you're
That's
impressed.
that's totally
Yeah.
true. Especially people who play games. I mean, we're all very passionate about the games that we play, and and are eager to share those experiences with others. So when something is made like a really big impact, emotionally, or you feel like seen, like I was able to like participate in this, and I haven't been able to do that before. That is an extremely powerful feeling, and
Yeah.
people are going to share that, and then other people are going to be like, "Oh wow, what's this about? Like, I really want to see." I mean, a great example is the God of War Ragnarok game, which had made huge strides in including accessibility controls for people with low vision, and it's just been critically acclaimed and celebrated globally. And and I mean, that's not to say that do it for the internet points. I mean, you can do it for the internet points, that's fine, but also do it because it's the right thing to do, and at least like spend some time thinking about it, and finding the best ways that you can to implement design that's going to have the greatest impact, because so, there's always going to be other bugs or features that are going to be competing for your time, and so it's not necessarily that it needs to be perfect, but it just needs to have that intention. Would you say that?
No, absolutely. It's sometimes actually I will say that in some countries there's a genuine like legal compliance that has to be made in making like things accessible. Like you have laws, regulations, standards, and if around inclusivity, and if it's not like met, it might result in legal penalty, and that's costly. Another reason why it's also important is how do you say, the economic benefit of inclusive research. So really by empowering most users to use this game, you can reach a wider customer base, and you can also like obviously like increase your revenue, how do you say, loyalty, etc. Yeah. And also to add, what's really important is inclusivity brings innovation, because you're often not, when you're looking through a tunnel vision at, okay, let's try to make this game usable. But let's not think outside the box. You might not see tiny details that make the most of it,
Hmm.
really. And by thinking about the overall user, like users that you might have, you're thinking about these details, you're including it in, you might think about a problem in a different way, you might go around it, you might, yeah, there's so many things
Hmm.
that are like adding value when you think about inclusivity. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not, these kinds of settings or features, or, what you add to your game can be used by anybody. And it's certainly going to be used by people who don't necessarily fall into, neat little boxes or categories. I really like watching TV and film with subtitles on, because sometimes the actors whisper, and I just like can't hear them. Uh,
Yeah.
and
But
yeah,
yeah.
so I like frequently use subtitles because in English, for English films, because yeah, I just really need it sometimes.
Yeah, I also agree with you. I mean, also like it's cultural, my first language is not English. So I also have to use subtitles for everything, and yeah, I think also you need to consider this, like cultural diversity is also
Mm.
inclusiveness. You need to think about people whose first language is not English, for example, whatever you're doing. Uh, So yeah, catering to everyone.
Absolutely,
Oh.
100%. So, we kind of started getting into this a little bit. Maybe we can articulate it a little bit more.
Hmm.
What kind of factors does one need to consider when designing a product, a game, or experience to ensure that it's inclusive?
So, very good question. So first of all, there's the physical abilities that you need to consider. So that comes like whether it's like motor accessibility or abilities, so like anything that has to do with your body. Then like visual abilities, like whether that's like a visual loss. Or different kind of visual loss. As well, there's different levels of loss, different, uh, yeah, I can't find the word, I'm sorry. Yeah, impairments, hearing impairments as well. And also like dexterity issues, like for example, if you have arthritis, for example, you might not interact with a product in the same way as somebody who is not. And that you need to consider, like this is a whole field of itself that you might
Mm.
need to consider. Then you have like all of the cognitive abilities. So you must design for users with different abilities, like for example, learning disability, somebody who might have ADHD, memory impairment, people with Alzheimer's disease. It's you just start seeing the world differently, and it's good to have this understanding and this empathy, really, in people just seeing the world differently. Um,
Mm.
a few other as well. I might just continue down the list. So you have like cultural
Sing
diversity.
it.
I will, I will. Uh, cultural diversity, anything that, again, what we were talking about, like maybe your user might, first language might not be English. They might not understand like the same local norms as somebody from like a specific region. Anything as well like cultural sensitivity. Is it a hot topic in my country, or is it something that is like penalized by law to even talk about it? That's really important. Um, to consider. Yeah. Also, technology accessibility. Do you have access to internet, or do you have access to technology? There's people that are not as technology literate as some others, and that is something to consider as well. Also, what kind of technology are they using to interact with your product? Like whether it's like assistive technology, like speech screen reader, sorry, speech to text, anything like this. By the way, Microsoft has a really good range of adaptive technology, and they really did like inclusive research within that to come up with a range that is flexible. It's really nice to see that there's all of these
Mm.
things happening for inclusiveness. And when there's one last on my list, sorry, is the economic accessibility. It's like considering how much am I going to value this game, or how much who might not be able to use this game because of economic reasons. Not everybody has the same situation, economically speaking, as well. So it's good to consider that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in terms of performance. I mean, there are some games that, just require, a certain level of, graphics card or RAM and things like that. And the higher that, barrier is, or the more demanding, your games are visually, you'll potentially be missing out on a whole bunch of people who really want to play your game but don't have the tech to play it. So definitely something to consider, when talking to and thinking from a developer's point of view, like trying to find different ways to, implement, solutions and code. I mean, full school, like I'm not a programmer. I don't really know much about this stuff, but I do know that there are, different ways to solve problems, and some of them require more processing power than
Yeah.
others. So again, just something to consider as well. It even goes that deep for in making your game inclusive. And there was something else that you mentioned way back. That I'm trying to remember. You just said like so many amazing things about all of the different things that people need to consider. And I think, one of, and something we mentioned earlier was, making sure that you include people that, are different from yourself. And that can actually be a really good place to begin, whether if it's, working with the, sort of resources that you have to hand. Maybe that's going out into your network and seeing like, hey, like, can, you check to see to make sure that, we haven't included anything in here that could be like culturally insensitive, or if it's going to land well with someone, even things like I was just talking to someone earlier about how there are certain kinds of like idioms, like let's like peel back the onion, which in kind of like as a English speaking idiom, let's see like what peeling back the layer, seeing what's underneath, like getting to the core of the problem. Apparently, that's like not a thing in
Oh,
Germany.
really?
And so if you try like translating that into German, they'd be like, "Why are we peeling onions?" I'm so confused. Um, so even little things like that can just kind of bring people out of your game. And so trying to have, either, and this is something that, we've done before at the labs, like having co-design sessions with individuals of different kinds of accessibility needs, different cultural backgrounds, speaking different languages and things like that. I mean, that's something we do for a lot of our projects to make sure that, if a game or a product is being launched somewhere that's outside of an English speaking country, that it's going to be accessible as well as, physically and cognitively accessible as well.
That's right. So
Yeah. So just kind of thinking like, so how, like, would you say, what are some of the skills that like someone might need to be an inclusive designer? Um, yeah.
I think you should really start by developing, or maybe not developing, but opening your thinking, your being more open, being more empathetic, empathic. Is that
Empathetic. Yeah.
empathetic?
Hmm.
And
Or empathic. Kind of
empathic,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that is just really the ability to understand and kind of relate to a certain degree to experiences of different users, understanding their needs. We actually do in Sutherland Lab a workshop. Laura, you've been there, but I just want to share with
Such a
everyone.
great workshop.
Yeah, it's basically on building your empathy thinking and discovering how people that are not yourself might experience the world differently. So whether it's like having arthritis to being pregnant, hey, you have to be inclusive to that sense as well. Pregnant women go through so much change in their body, and that affects like things that they might not, for example, like regular things that they were doing before they might not be able to do, but that is just like situational, you know. So yeah, really like building this empathy. Um,
Yeah, say a little more about the workshop because it was really fantastic and actually could really help people for, because like for me, I guess, I mean, I do know people with arthritis and like low vision and things like that, but it really helps put into perspective, like, wow, like I'm starting to build an understanding for like what people go through like on a daily basis.
Yeah, sure. So this workshop really came from so Laura mentioned that I come from a design and ergonomics background, so I did both fields, whatever. And there's something in ergonomics that's called anthropometry, which is basically measuring humans, measuring like different heights, different arms length, for example, grip strength, anything like this. And this is basically to design products for doors, for example, we design doors height at what is the highest, the tallest person going to be like, or in the middle, to design a door where everybody can pass, go through, etc. So it's really like we have sets of data that help us create designs, experiences, etc. So it comes from this. There's this thing in ergonomics that again they weren't really inclusive at the I mean a while back until very recently. Just to give you an example, again. In car crash tests, like the car crash dummy, was always like until really recently from the 50s to until like maybe like let's say 10 years ago, the crash test dummy was a male. And this kind of led to this butterfly effect kind of led to many external factors. So, for example, I think like 47% of women were involved in more serious accidents, more women rather than men. They basically experience more serious accidents, like whether it's, I'm not going to give you an example, but yeah, and until very recently, they added a crash test dummy that was a woman, just to, how do you say, as well, like, be more inclusive, but also, like, make cars more safe by testing with a female crash test dummy. I've got lost in my thoughts. I'm so sorry. What was the question?
That's okay because every time you do that, I'm just leaning in and being like, oh my God, I'm learning something new. And this is like
So,
all amazing and wonderful. I didn't know the thing about, I mean, I guess kind of the door makes sense. And it's interesting how like the evolution of the door has gotten slightly, slightly taller because of nutrition and whatnot. Um, but yeah, the crash test dummies, I guess, people thought, oh, well, we both have bodies. They're like the same, right?
so,
It's like, no, actually, we might be like made out of the same stuff, but the proportions are different. And everyone has different just like ways of existing, and it just really blows that it was something I knew, but again it just like blows my mind that like, oh, we don't need to test for like half of the world
so,
population, they'll be fine. But what I was asking, because we didn't thankfully you didn't make us try to be crash test dummies during the workshop. But during the workshop, you actually gave a presentation about, again, just like what we talked about here, like what inclusive design is, what's the philosophy behind it. And then you fabricated these different tools to enable us to have a small glimpse into what it is like for somebody to live with arthritis or glaucoma, and get schizophrenia, and those kinds of ways of being, and how that impacts everyday tasks.
Yeah, yeah, really. Again, thank you for mentioning it because I totally like forgot about this. So this is like a method called empathic modeling, and I just made it for made some DIY artifacts actually from B&Q. So this is really accessible to anyone. And uh, Sorry, let me start from the beginning of my thought. So this research method is basically not a holistic method, unfortunately, but it gives you a good understanding of what people might experience. It's usually done with, how do you say, for product designers, developers, anybody from the product team, to really experience what it's like, and put them, it's basically walk a mile in my shoe. But again, it's not holistic. It doesn't mimic pain. It doesn't, it basically you have the sensation for 10 minutes and then you go on with your day. And I think but although it's a good, how do you say, experience, and it's basically it's called I can't remember what is this name for learning by experiencing, experiential
Mm.
learning. I'm replying
There
to
you
my own
go.
questions.
You already had it, and
Yeah.
then we just needed to repackage it
Yeah.
into the right word.
Yeah, basically the reason why it works is the reason why it has a big impact on people like those product team, those stakeholders, is because it uses experiential learning. So rather than being lectured about something, you actually feel it. You have the physical ability to feel it, to see how restrictive it is. Try to do tasks with it. It's really, you will see that it's really straining, and you'll be really happy to take those artifacts off after 10 minutes. So it's really good to give people an understanding, build their empathy thinking. And yeah, you're most invited to come and join and check it out.
Yeah, it was honestly really eye opening. Because again, and you hear about people's experiences, and as I used to be a social worker for children, but often, well, all the time, I was speaking to parents, grandparents, carers, etc., and knew a lot of details about like their health background, and talking to them about these kinds of things, and how that impacts how they care for their family, and what can we do to ease that burden. But again, it's still all very theoretical, and not really, you're not experiencing it for yourself. And while it's temporary, and not necessarily, like I think I said before, it almost felt like a simulation, but that's still not, it's not exactly the right word, because at the end of the day, well, it's temporary, but you still learn so much from it. When I was wearing the gloves and trying to pick up coins, which is already extremely difficult anyways, but just adding like the stiff joints. And actually, it would have been cool to have, well, I think we might have tried some touch screens when we were there, but even to bring in some controllers as well, because I can imagine that would also be very difficult, especially trying to move like the joystick and things like that. And actually, I highly recommend that you all check out Special Effects, which is a non for profit that makes accessible like alternative controllers for people who, they might not have the dexterity with their fingers, so they use their forearm to control, and then they have big buttons to kind of, tap on to make their character stop or go. Um, really recommend that you check it out. And they have a developer's kit as well. So, and it's totally free. So definitely go check it out. But yeah, definitely something that you'd be able to do on your own,
Yeah.
to be able, because I think the gloves, it was just kind of like garden gloves and you attach some duct tape and pencils to it, right?
Yeah, basically the aim is just to mimic the impairment. So what I did was just buying exactly like garden gloves or construction gloves and taping a piece of wood. So by this I just cut like pencils in half, old pencils, and then basically the aim is to restrict the movement of your joints to mimic arthritis and make it difficult for you to do like small dexterity movements. And things like
Mm.
this, like when you're wearing it, it just has an impact. Like you will keep this experience with you. Like again, what I was talking at the beginning, like Madeleine de Proust, like an experience is even more memorable if you've actually felt it, if you actually experienced it. So I would invite everyone who's interested in like learning more about inclusive design to like, if not, come to the labs and experience it for yourself, or even like try it out at home.
Mm.
That's really actually really empowering. Like, and yeah.
100%. Or even if you wear glasses or have goggles for the glaucoma one, or just people, with low vision, just smear some Vaseline on there. Uh, that takes 2 seconds, and then you're able to see, or, well, not be able to see very well anymore due to, the blurriness and, and the kind of impact it has on your perception of light and shadows. Again, these are things that, anybody can try out. You don't need to have, a big fancy budget or something like that. That's something that anyone can give that a shot.
I agree completely. Yeah.
And that actually kind of leads into my kind of last question. Because we have a lot of independent game studios that listen to this. So how can they ensure that they're creating inclusive games?
Uh, yeah. So first of all, you should understand what principles inclusive design have. So from the beginning of the development stage to the very end, like understand this. So that can be even like having personas to understand your user, your audience, like different kind of personas for different like key user, and then refer to it at any basis of the development phase. So whether that's in like I idea development to even like testing, just like have this in mind, understand your user, understand, being aware of like the range of accessibility issue, inclusive, non-inclusiveness. I don't know how to say that. Also, like something that that might be interesting is to have the input of a community. So whereas like maybe having a panel of different users available for you to test your product at every stage of the design process might be interesting, because they come up with all different ideas. And it's good to have somebody's opinion throughout. Like it's basically user testing in a sense, but from the community. So definitely leveraging this community input. Um,
Mm.
Other stuff, just like training and education. So what we're saying, like, with Laura about the empathy workshop, like at the labs, just like educating yourself, being more aware of what accessibility or inclusiveness is, the range of factors that are within it, and yeah, using like accessible tools and platforms as well to really test your product. So that can even be like a screen reader or even like looking at your game in a different mode, like low vision, for example, or just so that you might not find a especially big problem down the line once you've released the game. And also, and again, but that is all the time, we're going to reiterate this because we're user experience researchers, but it's really like user testing. Test your product with users. They are the best. They're the public basically. So yeah.
Yeah, they're who you're making your game for,
Mm,
at the end of the day. And and making it for yourself too. That's of course a very important part of the journey, but at the end of the day, this is something that's going to be played by others, and doing, what you can with the resources that you have, and having that intention is already going to take you miles ahead to where you might have started.
Completely agree. No, and not being afraid of change or have sorry or of having this iterative mindset to get feedback, on what is good and what might not be as good. Yeah, it's really really important. Yeah,
Agreed. Who would have thought the user researchers would think user research
yeah,
is really important?
we're both yeah agreeing.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. Claire, any sort of last thoughts you want to part on the audience?
No, I mean, thank you so much for inviting me. I hope that what this overflow of words made sense in some case, but and yeah, that you might also be interested in inclusive design. And if you are, we're really happy to help. We're really passionate, everyone, about this, and we're also trying to, like, first of all, understanding that nothing is perfect and there's road to go, like from us as well. So we're trying to build this, and
Mhm.
I think we're in pretty good shape, or so far. Yes.
Yeah, it's a continuous. I think it's important just to kind of build off of that. It's a continuous progress,
Agreed.
right? I don't think the work never ends,
No.
and it's constantly changing, and requirements and needs, and the way that we make things is iterative in and of itself. And so, if, as you're kind of going on this journey, whether if it's you're an expert or someone new, you're always going to encounter speed bumps, and to not beat yourself up too much about it, but to just be proud that, yeah, I am thinking about this thing, and we're all trying at the end of the day.
Yeah, agreed.
Amazing. Well, that concludes another episode of the Game Dev Local podcast. I've been your host, Laura Donohue, and you can find me at LJ Donohue on LinkedIn. A big thank you to Claire again.
Yes.
Yay! For being my guest. I've wanted you on for so long. And where can people go to find out more about you?
Yeah, my name is Claire Vergnes on LinkedIn. I don't know what my LinkedIn handle is. I'm so sorry. Uh,
We'll link it. It's fine.
and yeah, you can find me there. Send me a message if you're interested to talk a bit more about anything that we've discussed today. Just really happy to support you. And yeah,
Amazing. Thank you so much.
thank you.